In case you didn't know, there's a new class on D&D Beyond, the Pugilist. A rough and tumble, spit in your eye, gravel in your gut bruiser that looks chock full of flavor and potential. Some are saying it's overpowered, some that it's too squishy, but maybe it's just right? Regardless, we're going to build one today and see if the damage is really as bonkers as some people say. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, I do character builds for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, I like to theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right or the best way to play a character, but in the hopes of creating a character that's both fun and powerful to play. So if you also enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you're into theorycrafting, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm really glad you're here, so thanks for watching. My name's Colby. So, as longtime viewers of the channel know, I don't do builds very often for third-party D&D creators, right? As much as I love them. I've done a couple of Blood Hunter builds in the past from Critical Role, like this one up here. I've talked with MCDM about the Illrigger right up here, but with just one exception, the build that I did for the Dungeon Dudes Way of the Arcane Hand Monk, actually, we're going through the cards quick today. Every single third-party build that I've ever done has performed pretty poorly. And when you do character build videos for your livelihood, it makes it hard to gamble and keep doing third-party stuff, right? And yet, I really enjoy them. So every once in a while, something really cool comes along, or I get enough requests in the comments about something, and I kind of just go, screw it, this looks too fun and I gotta do this. I want to play with this, right? And that's what's happening today because, yes, Benjamin Huffman's Pugilist has recently been fully incorporated into D&D Beyond and it looks freaking awesome, I gotta say. So here's hoping that a lot of you agree with my sentiment and watch this video so I can keep doing more third-party stuff, right? Tell your friends. You know, as an aside, it kind of surprises me that these third-party videos don't perform better, since according to polls that I've done in the past on my channel at least, the vast majority of you can pretty much play anything you want at your table so long as it shows up on D&D Beyond. I don't know, I mean, maybe you're all just lying in those poll responses? Or sure, if only 80% of regular viewers who say they can use the stuff end up watching the video, and fewer non-regular viewers watch because it's not something they can play with, and the algorithm gets off to a slow start, and the views go down the toilet. Whatever. This class looks amazing, and I'm doing a build for it. Algorithm be damned. Because, yeah, sure, I've tried my hand at cobbling together a, like, Street Fighter type build, right? A non-monk, mostly non-monk, unarmed striker who's strength-based and ornery. My favorite version of it is probably right up here. But even my best attempts have been a little ham-fisted, pun intended. And, you know, you're kind of forcing a square peg into a round hole in D&D 5e with this concept because nothing inherently matches the sort of streetwise, School of Hard Knocks, spit in your eye and gravel in your gut pugilist in the official content, even with multiclassing, I think. But this pugilist class, my goodness, does it just nail the feel and the vibe of that fantasy in spades, I think. There are so many great characters like this in pop culture throughout time, right? Rocky, Brad Pitt's bare knuckle boxer and Snatch, oh my gosh, I love that movie. Johnny Cash's Boy Named Sue, Jean from Gentleman Bastards books, right? UFC fighters, wrestlers, like people who use their body as a weapon, not because they've got their chakras aligned and can tap into the energy of the universe, as much as I love monks, but because their body is the only weapon they've ever had. They've grown up in a world that keeps trying to beat them down, and they've learned that the only way to stay alive is to just keep getting up every single time. And as a result, they've developed this almost superhuman level of grit and toughness that you're just not going to find anywhere else. That is the fantasy I want to be able to not only flavor my character with, but have actual good mechanics to support it with. And I think the Pugilist class really delivers on those things. The question that we've got to examine, though, is it balanced? Is it broken? Can it keep up damage-wise with other martials, or does it far surpass them, as a lot of people online are claiming? And if it does it sacrifice enough in survivability and utility to warrant that extra damage? Well, these are the kinds of questions that I basically created this channel to answer, so let's freaking dive in and find out, shall we? I'm really excited. I proudly present D&D Build number 249, the Bare-Knuckle Boxer Fight Club, the Balboa, Fists of Fury, the Clobber Baron, the Guy of the Tiger, the Hurricane, One Fist, Two Fist, Black and Blue Fist, the Knuckle Sandwich. Big thanks to everyone in Discord for the amazing suggestions, man. There were a ton more good ones that I didn't get time to name. My favorite was from Elfas, I think I'm saying that right, who came up with Muhammad 5E. That is so clever. The boxer formerly known as Cassius Slay, right? I had to give a shout out for that one because it was so good, but I think this time I'm just going to keep it super boring in an attempt to get more clicks and just stick with the Pugilist. Maybe I'll do more Pugilist builds in the future because this one does so well, and then I'll just rename this one to Muhammad 5e. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for this build. He does this every week. He's so talented. If you'd be interested in following him to see the other stuff that he's created, or to potentially even try and reach out to commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I will put links in the video description as always on how to do so. All right, at level 1 for our starting class, we're just going to start Pugilist. I am not going to do like a full review of the class and all of the subclasses or anything here, but I will try to give a little more detail on the features and things as we go to help explain them to everyone who's not yet familiar with them, right? So Pugilists have a D10 hit die, nice. Proficiency in strength and constitution saving throws, just like barbarians and fighters. And then their only weapon proficiencies are simple and improvised weapons, interesting. And then just light armor. No shields, no medium armor, but that's okay. We won't really want those things anyways. Well, we might want them, but we won't be using them. As for our species that I'd consider here, I think Loxodons would be near the top of my list if I could use them. And I mean, if you can use this class, I have to assume you could probably play a Loxodon if you wanted. Mostly that's so you can grapple more enemies, sure, right? Like their trunk can grapple. Or Simic Hybrid, but Simic Hybrid grappling is kind of wonky. But yeah, I think Pugilists are better grapplers than any other class now, especially if you build for it and you take the right subclass, right? But even if you don't, grappling's great. Beyond that, I like dwarves for their extra hit points and because I think their personality just meshes well with a Pugilist. Humans are always great for an extra origin feat. There are plenty of species I'd love to have, but as always, anything's gonna work. I mean, heck, take a gnome or a halfling if you just want to be an adorable, feisty little scrapper. I'm gonna assume, yeah, we're going, Goliath with a fire ancestry for damage purposes, and because being able to grow to large size as a Goliath would help us be able to grapple more, bigger targets if we decided to go that route. Speaking of damage, let me mention this here. Yeah, I really want to push this build just as hard as I possibly can for damage today. I mean, I often do this with my builds, right? But especially for my first ever Pugilist, I really want to see how it stacks up with other builds I've done. So I'm absolutely going to be like exploring the limits of what's possible here damage-wise. Because I think we all want to know if the numbers are as good as some people are claiming, right? As for our background then, yeah, I'd take an old or a custom one and make it my own if I could. But if I couldn't, I'd probably go like Farmer, Flaming Fist Mercenary, or Rashemi Wanderer if I had to. I'd be a little annoyed about it if I did have to, because all of those backgrounds give the ability score increases that we want, and then the tough feat, which would be a solid pick, no question, for some extra survivability. Something that I think this character is going to lack. But yeah, the origin feat I most want for damage purposes anyway is lucky, of course, but nothing that offers the lucky feat gives the right ability score increases. So here's hoping you can customize or pick an old one and make it your own. If not, tough is great. Or sure, other options are worth considering too, like Tavern Brawler to get a little more mileage out of our unarmed strikes, or Alert, etc. But lucky works really well here since it lets us have advantage on a d20 test of our choice, proficiency bonus times per day, and that's just about all that we are going to need, eventually anyways, to keep advantage going on all of our attacks, as we will see in a few minutes. For our starting ability scores, assuming that we go the point buy method as always, I'm going to say let's go 15 strength and take a +2 there, a 15 constitution and a +1, and then 14 wisdom or dexterity, or maybe 12 of each. You choose. Keep in mind that the higher dexterity isn't going to necessarily help our armor class. So even though it would be good for initiative, for dexterity saves, dex-based skill checks, I think I'd probably favor wisdom on this build personally for saves and for perception, but you choose. As for our starting equipment, just grab some gravel for your gut and some spit for your eye. Maybe some pocket sand. You don't really need much equipment-wise. You're similar to a monk, right? You could get light armor if you wanted, just for looks, but it's not going to do much for our armor class, as we will see. And we don't need weapons, because yeah, at level 1, pugilists get fisticuffs, first of all, which is similar to the monk's like martial arts feature. It says that if we're just wielding pugilist weapons, which are either simple or improvised weapons, and we're only wearing light armor or less and not using a shield, then we get the following benefits. We can make an unarmed strike as a bonus action. We can use our fisticuffs die in place of our unarmed strikes or pugilist weapons, and that die is a, wait for it, D8, right at level 1. Nice, and yeah, it'll scale all the way up to 2d6 eventually. I love it. Also, we're told here that if we use an improvised weapon, we can enjoy the sap mastery when we use it. That's cool. I'm not going to be building around improvised weapons today, but it is a lot of fun to imagine, you know, grabbing the leg of a smashed bar stool or a broken bottle and fighting with them and then getting both superior damage and being able to impose disadvantage on attacks when you hit with it from sap, right? We also get the Iron Chin feature here, which says that if you are wearing light or no armor and no shield, then your armor class equals 12 plus your constitution modifier. So it's basically like unarmored defense, only it doesn't benefit from our dexterity at all. Nor does it benefit from that light armor that we're wearing, unless the armor is magical, right? And that's the real benefit here over, say, what other classes get with unarmored defense. That said, it's going to be tough to get that AC up. Right now, it's only a 15. And it's not going to go up for a long time unless we wanted to sacrifice our damage in place of our survivability, which, you know, wouldn't be a bad idea necessarily. Or, you know, we found some good magical light armor. So yeah, not a great AC. Most likely worse than barbarians and monks and dance bards and draconic sorcerers. And this is one of the biggest complaints that I've been seeing about the pugilist. Their survivability is potentially problematic. We will discuss it as we go. You know who isn't problematic at all? Not even potentially? My channel members and patrons. Let me give them a quick shout out here if you wouldn't mind. Thank you guys so much for your support. I couldn't do what I do without you. I say this every week, I know, but I mean it. If you're not a member or a patron of the channel, I'd love it if you'd consider becoming one. There's a button down there, it says join, or you can find links to my Patreon in the video description. And that way you can learn about all of the perks that I offer to members and patrons. Those perks include access to the library of write-ups that I do for each of these builds to help you recreate them a little more easily yourself, access to the community Discord server, and access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we have. I actually give all of my perks to anyone who signs up just at the silver level or higher. It's a couple bucks a month, and then I just ask that you pay, you know, what you think you can afford, or what you think it's worth. But if you don't feel like you can afford even that, or just are not interested in supporting the channel in that way, that's fine. I'm just glad you're here, watching, liking, subscribing. Those are also great ways to support, so thanks. At level 2, pugilists get the Moxie feature, which is basically like the monk's focus feature, right? We get a number of Moxie points that go up with more pugilist levels, but it's not one per pugilist level. It's more like half of your pugilist level plus 1. So we only have 2 for now, but by level 10, we would only have 6. We get them back on a short rest, and we can use these points for one of 3 things. Brace Up says that we can spend a point and a bonus action to gain temporary hit points equal to a roll of our fisticuffs die plus our pugilist level and our constitution modifier. This is a nice bit of on-demand survivability, but they do expire after just 10 minutes, so it's kind of hard to know when to use this feature unless you're already in a fight, right? Or you know that one's coming and you've got some moxie to spare. 1-2 punch is kind of like flurry of blows, letting us spend a point to make 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action instead of 1. And then stick and move lets us spend a bonus action and a point to both make an unarmed strike and dash or disengage. I appreciate the option to get in a little jab and basically step of the wind simultaneously, right, if need be. We also get Bloodied but Unbowed at this level, which is much needed. It says that once per short rest, when we take damage, we can use our reaction to regain all of our spent Moxie points. Better yet, if we're bloodied when we do this, so half health or below, right, we also gain temporary hit points equal to 4 times our pugilist level. Okay, so that is some decent survivability. It won't stop us from getting hit, but I don't know, it kind of feels like this class sort of should be getting hit a lot to me, yeah? That's kind of their thing, getting hit but not going down, like Steve Rogers or Rocky. Anyways, these temporary hit points last until you finish a short rest, so you could potentially use this at the end of a combat encounter, but maybe before you heal up with a spell or a potion. You do need to take damage in order to activate it though, so I don't know, maybe have a companion give you a little love tap or just punch yourself in the face. But we are not done yet. 3 features at level 2. We also get Swagger Streak. This tells us that when we fail a dexterity, strength, or constitution, or charisma check, not a save, right, then we can spend a moxie point to roll the fisticuffs die and add it to the roll, potentially turning it into a success, and only spending that point if it actually causes us to succeed. Nice bit of utility, though intelligence and wisdom checks are out of luck. And it is expensive. Those moxie points are few and far between, especially at these early levels. At level 3, we get Heavy Hitter. This says that if we hit with an unarmed strike, we can both damage and try to grapple or shove at the same time. It's kind of like half of the grappler feat, but better in that we can do this every time we make an unarmed strike, not just once per turn, right? That's pretty awesome, and is one thing that makes pugilists better grapplers than pretty much anyone now. I've decided, however, that I'm not going to build around grappling today. I love the option. I'd recommend doing it if you want to add a little control to your game. If you did want to build around it though, I would for sure go with the squared circle for your subclass, which is sort of like the cage fighter subclass and has some really awesome stuff for grapplers. Speaking of subclasses, we get ours at this level, and what should we go with? There are so many great options. I'm gonna rule out Dog and Hound, which is the pet subclass, even though it's cool in a junkyard dog flavorful way, as well as Hand of Dread and Street Saint, even though they both look interesting and powerful. One is sort of a hybrid warlock option. Nice, that's unique among classes, right? And the other gets some paladin-like features. As cool as they are, I really want this character to be like a no magic, just street tough character, so we're gonna pass on those for now. That leaves us with either Piss and Vinegar, which is just the best subclass name of all time and will never be dethroned, or Sweet Science. Piss and Vinegar is the quintessential, like, roguish, dirty fighter, right? Lots of great debuff, pocket sand, step on your toes kind of stuff, with some great soft taunt abilities too, even an AoE soft taunt, which is heretofore unseen in D&D 5e, at least for official content. But I think that the best no magic damage dealer option is the Boxer, right? Sweet Science, which, for those who don't know, is a term coined by British sports writer Pierce Egan in 1813 to describe boxing. Sweet Science pugilists get 2 features here. Bare Knuckle Boxer, which just scratches my brain in exactly the right way when I think of what I most want this class to be. This feature just says that when we make unarmed strikes, we crit on a 19 or a 20, like champion fighters, right? But only for unarmed strikes. And then there's Cross Counter, which says that when we take damage from a melee attack, we can use our reaction and a moxie point, unfortunately, to reduce the damage by a d10 plus our strength modifier plus our pugilist level. So similar to the monk's deflect attacks, but we have to spend a point for it, and it only works against melee attacks, unfortunately. That said, if we reduce the damage to 0, we can just automatically make an unarmed strike or pugilist weapon attack against a creature within our reach as part of the same reaction. So that could be really cool. At level 4, we get Dig Deep, which is super on point thematically and pretty cool and a little complicated. It says that we can spend a bonus action to have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage for 10 minutes, and that during that time, we can ignore the effects of any exhaustion levels we have less than 6 levels of exhaustion, at which point you die. As a reminder, this is going to be important today. Exhaustion in 5.5 got a lot nastier. It reduces our speed by 5 times our exhaustion level, not the end of the world necessarily, and reduces every single d20 test by 2 times our exhaustion level. Ouch. Okay, so keeping that in mind, it says that we can use Dig Deep to get that damage resistance just once per day, or if we take a level of exhaustion. That's kind of cool, I think, since, yeah, using the feature lets us ignore exhaustion levels, right? Up to 6 levels. So, yeah, during a long adventuring day with lots of fights, you could potentially be giving yourself up to 5 levels of exhaustion, but not feeling them during combat. and actually resisting most of the damage that you'd be subject to, right? Bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage, that's most damage, at least for most monsters up through like tier 3 of play, I'm gonna say. But then as soon as the fight is over, as soon as those 10 minutes are up, oof, it hits you, right? And you're slow and you're failing most of your ability checks and saving throws if you gotta make them. So there's risk there. But then when a fight breaks out, you just, come on, I got this, let's go. And you just find that grit that helped you survive on the streets all those years and you just push through. I don't know, mechanics aside, I freaking love the feel and flavor of this. And yeah, resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage is really great. So here's hoping you don't have too many combat encounters in a day so you can use this most, if not every fight. We also get a feat here, of course, and there are several half-strength feats that I would consider here. Grappler or Street Justice actually could be a nice way to get advantage on attacks against grappled targets, among other things, if we were going to be reliably grappling, but we won't actually need that advantage in a minute here, so maybe not for this build. Mage Slayer is always great, mostly to guarantee us a successful mental save once per short rest. I'd even consider Purple Dragon Commandant here, since I'm assuming that we'd be bloodied fairly often with this character, as that would give us advantage on attacks while bloodied. You know, we don't have a very good armor class, and we benefit from unbloodied but unbowed if we use it while we're bloodied, right? And you know, this feat would give us advantage on attacks while bloodied and let us throw out some temporary hit points to an ally, which is a nice support option. And we don't get many of those on this class outside of the Street Saint subclass. But I think the feat that I'd favor over any of those would actually be Sentinel here. It would bump our strength to 20 and then let us make an opportunity attack even if an enemy disengages or when they hit a target other than us with an attack. Since we've already got one way to potentially make a reaction attack thanks to cross counter, right? I figure let's kind of build on that and see if we can't do some things to make it so we'd be getting a reaction attack maybe more often than not or half the time. This is one of the things that would help us do that. Oh, and also, Sentinel says that if we hit with an opportunity attack, we reduce the creature's move speed to 0 so they can't get away. I love it. Flavor it like you've kicked him in the knee or something to hobble him, right? Super cool. Okay, at level 5, we get extra attack, thankfully, so that we can attack twice with the attack action. That would be 4 attacks potentially on our turn if we had the Moxie point to spend, right, for 1-2 punch. And at this level, each of them would do a d10 since our Fisticuffs die goes up. That's awesome. But then we get this sweet little ditty, Haymaker. I love this. I think this is my favorite, Pugilist feature. Haymaker says that when we make an unarmed or Pugilist weapon attack, we can spend a Moxie point, and if we hit, the attack does maximum damage, and we get the Moxie point back. Okay, that is some awesome high risk, high reward stuff that I kind of live for. Really makes me want to add a monk level to this build so I can make my unarmed strikes with dexterity if I want. No prohibition against that here. And then, yeah, pick up Elven Accuracy so I can really make sure that my haymakers are landing. But yeah, not only do I not want to hear about people complaining in the comments about Elven Accuracy, it just doesn't fit the vibe that I was going for with the build. I want a strength-based street tough today, right? Not a super dexterous one necessarily. Though I would consider it, for sure, if your table allows for older 2014 content. Anyways, we will still get a lot of use out of this, I think. I'm kind of going to be building around it. And doing max damage on attacks is awesome. I love the way this can sort of fuel a big run of big damage. There's no once per turn limit here on Haymaker, so we could spend a point every single attack to try and do max damage. As long as we keep hitting, we keep getting the point back. It's like getting a sweet combo run in those old arcade fighter games, right? But if you miss, oof, you missed your attack and you wasted a Moxie point. It's kind of like the old stunning strike getting resisted by monks and you're just blowing all of your points on trying to stun. And we only have 3 Moxie points right now and we use them for everything. So yeah, some of the complaints about the class are that it feels a bit like the 2014 monk in that they needed key for everything, right? And never seemed to have enough. If only we had a way to guarantee advantage so we could more reliably land our hits and keep our Moxie points more often. Oh, look at that, level 6. And as a sweet science boxer, we get Combo Maker, which says that when we deal damage with an unarmed strike, instead of getting to also grapple or shove for free, thanks to that heavy hitter feature we got back at level 3, remember, we can instead just have advantage on all attack rolls we make against that target before the start of our next turn. Amazing. So we just got to make sure to land 1 punch, and then we can start the advantage and Haymaker train rolling. Chew, freaking chew. And I'm glad I've got the lucky feat for just that reason. Oh, we also get the Moxie Fueled Fists feature here, which says that our unarmed strikes and pugilist weapon attacks can deal force damage if we want, which is great since force is almost never resisted. Okay, this brings us then to our very first damage report. So here's what combat would ideally look like for us if we were able and willing to just kind of blow all of our resources to go all out for damage over a 4-round combat encounter. Let's say that we activate Dig Deep before combat starts. I don't know. It lasts 10 minutes. Definitely not a guarantee that you'd be able to get it going before a fight breaks out, but it's not on a 1-minute timer, right? If you couldn't, I'd probably activate it on round 1 if you had the Moxie point to spend. That damage resistance is going to be a big deal. I'm going to pretend that we don't need to and can just start swinging, but at this point, we would only have 3 Moxie points left since we only had 4 to start with, right? So we just run up to our target and start making unarmed strikes. We would burn a luck point to get advantage on that first attack, and assuming it hits, activate Combo Maker to get advantage on the rest of our attacks. Every hit would deal 1d10 plus 4 damage, and if we spend a Moxie point, we could make 4 attacks. That would bring us down to 2 points left, though. Do we try to burn them for haymakers? Of course we do. Who do you think I am? The problem is, the math gets tricky now. With a +7 to hit, which we have, and assuming advantage on our attacks, which is most likely, we've got a 99% chance to hit against a 10 armor class, and a 64% chance against a 20 armor class. How often are you fighting against a 20 AC at level 6? Probably not all that often, but it happens. More likely you'll be going against something in the like 15 to 17 range, right? Meaning around an 80% plus chance to hit. But that's not 100%, is it? And on 4 attacks per round, the chance of at least 1 miss is fairly high. So let's say that we lose 1 more Moxie point trying to haymaker with every attack, leaving us with just 1 after the first round, right? Oof. Then, if we get hit by a melee attack, we might want to spend that point to reduce the damage and return a hit via our Sweet Science's cross-counter feature. But that would leave us with 0 Moxie points. Thankfully, all we have to do is take damage again to get all of our points back. So let's do this. For number crunching, I'm not going to assume that we're spending a Moxie point for cross-counter just yet. You might want to. It might keep you alive. I'm just trying to go all out for damage and see what it looks like. I'd hope that in actual gameplay, getting damage resistance via Dig Deep plus our D10 hit die and 16 Constitution will be enough to keep us on our feet, but it might not be. Again, we have a 15 AC without magical light armor. Do you have a healer? Does your DM like to throw lots of deadly encounters at you between long rests? This is risky, but it will at least give us an idea of what the damage is capable of if we just throw caution to the wind. So let's assume that we take damage, recover our Moxie, and have enough to get us through the rest of the combat encounter. It's not perfect, but the math is complicated and I've got to make some assumptions at some point. So let's just say that we haymaker with every punch and we deal 10 damage with it instead of a D10 plus a 4 from strength for 14 per swat, right? And we do have a 19% crit chance as a Sweet Science Pugilist with advantage, right? Meaning we would do 24 damage on a haymaker crit. And then I guess with Sentinel, I'm going to assume like a 20% chance to get a reaction attack. That might be a little high, but if so, surely not more than a few percentage points on average, right? And yeah, I'm just going to assume that we are adding a Fire Giant Goliath D10 to 3 of our attacks, maybe 1 a round for the first 3 rounds. And guess what? Yeah, if we throw that Fire Giant Goliath damage onto a haymaker, it's just a flat 10 damage. 20 if we crit. I know that feels a little crazy, but remember, the verbiage for haymaker says, quote, on a hit, regain the expended Moxie point and you deal maximum damage with that attack. There's nothing in there about max damage of the weapon or anything like that, meaning if we were to add stuff to the attack, as long as it's part of the attack, it should do max damage too. Okay. Under all of these assumptions then, averaged over a 4-round combat encounter against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would do 72 damage per round. And against a 15 AC, it would be 65 DPR. Holy crap. I mean, this is way above the hardest hitting build I've ever done at this level. Check the spreadsheet that's in the video description if you want to see the comparisons. But, deep breaths, everybody. Let's reiterate what's happening to get these numbers and what else is going on with this build, right? First of all, we might get unlucky and miss more attacks than I assume and run out of Moxie from going for haymakers long before the end of the fight here. That would seriously hurt our numbers. What's more, we are blowing through all of our expendable resources here. Lots of them come back on a short rest, but some of them not until a long rest. If you have another combat encounter before you take a short rest, your damage is going to be pretty dang paltry. We're talking D10 plus 4 times 3, so like less than 30 DPR. I mean, honestly, that's not bad for a resourceless attacker, but it's less than half of what I just reported, right? If you can get a short rest between each fight, you'll be looking pretty good. Probably in the 40 DPR range or higher, I'd guess, on average. And then, of course, there's our survivability. A 15 armor class, 58 hit points or so, maybe resistance to most of the damage that you'd take at this level anyways, but even then, you're getting hit a ton and might not be long for this world without some pretty dedicated support. So yeah, it looks to me like the epitome of a glass cannon. And of course, me being me, I freaking love that. But let's have our eyes wide open about the pros and cons of what's happening here, right? And keep in mind that the best laid plans of mice and men and boxers oft gone agley. Getting this out of the lab and into the game is gonna look a lot different, depending on your table, depending on your encounter. So, okay, are we all grounded? Great. Let's see how it scales. By taking fighter levels at level 7, of course. Okay, I know. If I were really interested in just a thorough investigation of the class, I should just do a single class pugilist. But that's only part of what I'm interested in. What I most want to know is, can I break this thing and still be a pure martial, right? So yeah, there are definitely some nice things deeper into the pugilist class, and we'll get back to it before too long to grab most of the best ones, I think. But we just get so much from a few fighter levels, both mechanically and thematically, I think. So let's get into the details. At Fighter 1, we get weapon masteries first up, and this just does great things for us because remember, just like with monks, as long as we're using like pugilist weapons, which are simple and improvised weapons, then the damage die equals our fisticuffs die. So we could grab, say, the nick property here by mastering a dagger or a light hammer or even a sickle. Yeah, let's go with the sickle. Never built around that before. And then the vex property via the hand axe. And the weapon attacks would be a d10 of damage plus strength regardless. And doing this is great because it would let us make 3 attacks with our action and still leave our bonus action free for unarmed strikes, right? Couple things to remember here though. Our combo maker feature, the thing that was giving us advantage on all of our attacks until next turn as a sweet science pugilist, that only gets triggered with unarmed strikes. Fortunately, we can use our bonus action to unarmed strike before taking the attack action to set that up, which we'd want to probably do anyways. I'll get into it in the next damage report. Haymaker works on pugilist weapon attacks and unarmed strikes, so no bad news there. But the bare knuckle boxer feature from Sweet Science that lets us crit on a 19, yeah, again, remember, that's for unarmed strikes only. So adding weapon attacks isn't just a straight upgrade necessarily, but on average it will increase our damage. You might not want to do it because it goes against your character concept, and I totally respect that. I think if it were me, I would for sure flavor this like maybe having brass knuckles on one fist and like spikes or like glass shards on fist wraps in the other hand or something. But if you don't like that and you just want to be a more like pure boxer or whatever, no worries. I think I'd still consider fighter levels here for other reasons, but it's a little less compelling if we're not making weapon attacks for sure. Anyways, at Fighter 1, we also get a fighting style, and 2-weapon fighting would be our best damage option, so we could still add our strength modifier to that nick weapon attack. And then we also get Second Wind, which isn't a big self-heal. It's a d10 plus our fighter level as a bonus action, right? A couple of times a day and once more per short rest, but it's not nothing. And yeah, we're probably going to need every hit point we can get, so I appreciate it. At level 8, we would be a Fighter 2, and that means we get Action Surge, and this is just huge, of course, letting us take 2 actions on our turn, once per short rest for some nice additional burst damage. But level 9, Fighter 3, is what I'm most excited about here, since we get our subclass, and of course, we would be going Battle Master. I think it's such a great fit thematically, at least if you're trying to build like a more savvy, kind of skilled, expert brawler with lots of tactics and strategies, right? Battle Masters get Students of War first up for some extra proficiencies, and then, yeah, their main feature, Combat Superiority. This gives us 4 superiority dice. They're d8s. They reset on a short rest. We are like short rest champions for sure here. And they can be used to fuel one of 3 maneuvers that we can pick from a nice list here. I think there are 3 must-haves for this build. First, Menacing Attack. I think it fits a Pugilist Street Tough so well. When you land an attack with this, you add the superiority die and damage, and then force your target to make a wisdom save, or they are frightened until the end of your next turn, meaning they can't move closer to you. Too bad, you're already in their face. And they have disadvantage on all of their attacks and ability checks. This is not only super flavorful, but will help our survivability too, which we sorely need, right? The second maneuver I would prioritize here is Riposte. It says that if a creature misses us with a melee attack roll, we can use our reaction to make a weapon or unarmed strike against them, adding the superiority die in damage to that attack. Yeah, one more way to get a reaction attack. I'm trying to build those up so I can maybe get to the 50% assumption level eventually. We'll see. But most important of all of our maneuver options, good old precision attack. This says that when we miss with an attack roll, we can spend a superiority die to roll that d8 and add it to the attack roll, potentially turning the miss into a hit. And if we are truly going to be risking Moxie with every single attack to do max damage from Haymaker, right? But we only spend that Moxie if we miss? Yeah, I want to do everything in my power to have a backup in case I do miss, even with advantage. The question is, now that we're level 9 and ready for our next damage report, do we assume that we're spending those superiority dice on precision attack, menacing attack, or riposte? If I assume precision attack, then I think I would just crunch numbers with the assumption that we're not losing 1 Moxie point every round from missed Haymakers. It's imperfect math, but it's close enough to be almost perfect. And that in turn might let me assume that I've got a Moxie point for things like Sweet Science's Cross Counter, which could let me reduce incoming damage and get a reaction attack slightly more often. On the other hand, maybe I just add a d8 of damage to 1 attack once per turn, whether from riposte or menacing attack. Because if I land a Haymaker, which I almost assuredly will at least once per round, right? Then I just get to add a flat 8 more damage if I throw a superiority die on top of it, and that's a lot of damage. 16 if we crit. And our unarmed strikes at least have a 19% chance to crit, right? Oof. So yeah, the math is complicated and it forces me again to make some assumptions. When I crunch the numbers for both options, assuming that we were getting a d8 of extra damage once per round, comes out just a little bit ahead, especially at those easier to hit enemy armor classes. But I think it's probably better to just assume that we're saving those superiority dice for precision attack for now. That might change later, but yeah, we've got so few Moxie points that doing everything we can to preserve them while still throwing Haymakers feels like the smarter, if more conservative way to go. We've also added Action Surge for some extra damage on round 1 here, and of course an additional attack thanks to our old buddy Nick. So at this point, here's what combat would ideally look like. On round 1, run up to your target and use your bonus action and a Moxie point to make 2 unarmed strikes using a luck point on that first one to get advantage, right? And then, assuming it hits, triggering Combo Breaker for advantage on all the rest of your attacks until the start of your next turn. You'd then take your action to make 2 more unarmed strikes, right? This is just round 1. And then Action Surge, assuming you've got it, to make your 3 weapon attacks. And you'd want to make sure that your final weapon attack is made with that Vex weapon, since, remember, Vex lets you have advantage on your next attack against that target before the end of your next turn. Meaning that if the target is still alive anyways on your next turn, your first unarmed strike against them next round will already have advantage without needing to spend a luck point. Rounds 2 through 4, it's just kind of rinse and repeat, but without Action Surge, of course. Just like last time, I will assume that we've got the Moxie thanks to Bloodied but Unbowed, which lets us recover them once per short rest when we get hit, remember, to use 1-2 punch every turn, and maybe I'll up the chance of a reaction attack just a skosh to like a 33% chance, since thanks to precision attack, we're even less likely to miss our Haymakers, meaning we'd be more likely to have a Moxie point to use for cross counter and potentially a reaction attack, right? Some nice synergy here actually that I haven't mentioned yet. Remember that if we use Dig Deep to give us resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, if we're already reducing incoming damage by half in that way, then when we use cross counter to further reduce it by a d10 plus our strength modifier plus our pugilist level, we're a lot more likely to reduce it to 0 and thus trigger the reaction attack. If we took like 30 piercing damage from an enemy, right, with Dig Deep active, that'd be reduced to 15, and then if we used cross counter, we would reduce that damage at this level here by an average of 15.5. So if you get hit for 30 damage or less, there's a very high likelihood that you're going to be able to cut that damage to 0. Just once per turn. and only so long as we've got the Moxie to spend. But that's pretty sweet, considering that it would let us make a reaction attack as well, right? Okay, whew, I know, that's a lot. If we go with these assumptions, average it over a 4-round combat encounter against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would do 101 damage per round, and against a 16 AC it would be 94 DPR. And yeah, we broke 100 DPR at level 9. This is starting to feel a little broken. But then again, you know what? Maybe not. Why? Because that Pyromaniac build that I did a few months ago, right up there, that Lore Bard with a Sorcerer Dip that was concentrating on Conjure Minor Elementals and throwing out Scorching Rays, they were at 126 DPR at this level, at least on the easier to hit targets. Granted, they were burning all of their long rest resources, spell slots, right, to get there, but we're burning all of our long rest and short rest ones to get here. And sure, that build had to be within 15 feet in order to do that damage, but this Pugilist has to be in melee. You know what's really crazy about the build here so far, though? The burst damage potential. It's kind of like burst damage is back, baby. If you just open up on round 1 with Action Surge, blowing all of your Fire Giant Goliath uses and your superiority dice to make 7 attacks that all potentially do max damage, you'd be around 200 damage on round 1, depending on the enemy AC. You'd be a lot weaker the rest of the encounter, but still, that's fun. So, is it broken? We're going to get into it more in the final thoughts. I'll just put a pin in that thought. Keep in mind we're pretty dang squishy still. Maybe less so if we can be deflecting attacks with Moxie, but that might not be enough to save our bacon in a real fight, and it's probably going to lower our damage, right? Let's keep going, see how we do in Tier 3 of play. At level 10, I think we do just one more level of fighter to grab that feat so that we can, cap our strength, bump it to 20. Or, I mean, sure, if you wanted to take another strength half feat, one of the ones I mentioned last time, right? Probably Mage Slayer, etc. That'd be justifiable, I think. I just really want to get my Constitution up too, since it would both help our armor class and our hit points, of course. So capping strength now for damage would let us start focusing on Constitution eventually, which would be nice. But at level 11, I think we got to get back to Pugilist. We really need more Moxie. And there are plenty of gems coming up here in both the class and the subclass. So that would make us a Pugilist 7, meaning we get down but not out. This says that when we use Bloodied but Unbowed, that thing that lets us get our Moxie points back when we take damage, if we do it while we're bloodied, which normally means that we get some temporary hit points, then we can also now add bonus damage to our unarmed strikes and Pugilist weapon attacks for an entire minute, equal to our Constitution modifier plus the number of exhaustion levels we have, which again, if we're giving ourselves exhaustion a lot because we're masochistic, but also because we want to keep activating Dig Deep for bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage resistance, right? Then this might actually increase our damage. I wouldn't recommend intentionally giving ourselves exhaustion necessarily, but if it means damage resistance for 10 minutes, hard to say. And hey, this at least would give us a little damage bump regardless, so long as we activated it while we were bloodied. That said, I have no idea if you're going to be bloodied when you use Bloodied but Unbowed. It seems likely, but I don't think I want to add it to numbers just on a hunch. I guess I could try to do like 50% of the time you're bloodied or something, but ugh, the math is already complicated and imprecise enough as is. I'm already making some assumptions. Just know that the numbers might actually be higher than what I report going forward if you're bloodied when you activate Bloodied but Unbowed. At level 12, we would be a Pugilist 8, which gets us another feat. That would let us bump our Constitution to 18 here, helping out our health and our armor class, which would only be at a 16 now at level 12. Yikes. I hope you found some +3 light armor along the way. At level 13, we would be a Pugilist 9, and that means we get School of Hard Knocks. This is pretty awesome, not just because it has knocks in the name. It says that once per turn, when we hit with an unarmed strike or Pugilist weapon attack, we can add a d12 of damage. And remember, if we're using Haymaker, that's just 12. We could also forego that damage, though, to endanger them, which says that the next time a creature is hit by an attack, the attack deals max damage. So basically, it's like a risk-free Haymaker, might be worth using if you don't have any Moxie left. Try for that Haymaker next time, right? But you do, say, have a Fire Giant Goliath use left to burn, or maybe you've got a Flame Tongue weapon that you're attacking with, right? In that case, max damage on a hit would be better than just like that D12, right? Or maybe you've got an ally that's a big hitter. And there's no reason that you couldn't just endanger them on your first attack and enjoy max damage on your second one. You could also forego the extra damage to provoke them, which gives them disadvantage on attacks against anyone but you until the end of your next turn. And while I love the idea of a Pugilist tank, especially with the Piss and Vinegar subclass, we are way too squishy to use this on this build. No, thank you. But this brings us to our next damage report. Since last check, we have increased our strength and given ourselves a once per turn D12 of damage. And remember, this is once per turn, not on your turn, so reaction attacks would benefit from that too. We've also just added one more Moxie point, a nice bonus damage if you're almost dead feature that I won't take into consideration, and then some better defense. Tactics are pretty much the same though, go punch stuff. I'm just going to assume that we're saving our superiority die for precision attack still so that we can keep throwing haymakers, especially with that once per turn D12 in the mix now. And we'll still stay at a 33% chance for a reaction attack. But under those assumptions, averaged over 4 rounds against a 10 armor class, we would now do 120 damage per round. And against a 17 AC, it would be 115 DPR. And okay, that's great, but the scaling has slowed down a bit. Like with all martials, right? It's still beating out every other DPR build I've done to date except that Pyromaniac, who, for the record, is almost double us at this level. Jeez. But we've got some other builds that are creeping up on us here. A couple of weapon-using warlocks, even that BFG Barbarian, believe it or not, the blade-flinging giant. I would also argue that we're probably more at risk of death than any of those characters. Maybe. I mean, I guess that Pact of the Blade lock was pretty squishy too, but anyways. Big, huge damage, big, huge risk. Let's see what it looks like in the endgame. At level 14, we would be a Pugilist 10, and that means we get Herculean first up, which is mostly a ribbon feature, doubling our strength score for carrying capacity, giving us auto criticals when we punch an object, that's fun, and doubling our jump distance, which actually could come in handy quite often, potentially. We also get Shake It Off, which is definitely not a ribbon feature. It says that at the start of each of our turns, no action required by us, we can just remove 1 level of exhaustion on ourselves or end the blinded, charmed, deafened, frightened, paralyzed, poisoned, restrained, or stunned conditions. That's pretty awesome. Now, once we use this feature, we can't use it again until we finish a long rest, unless we take a level of exhaustion. No action, again, required by us to do that. And I mean, when we use the feature, we can remove a level of exhaustion, though I assume that we would be using it again in order to remove one of those conditions, right? So that's a little bit risky, but just keep in mind, Dig Deep lets us ignore exhaustion levels up to level 6. So yeah, this might be adding exhaustion on us, but it potentially won't slow us down too much in combat at least. And again, I like the high risk, high reward. At level 15, we would be a Pugilist 11, and that means we get Combo Breaker as a sweet scientist. This is an awkwardly named subclass, sorry. Anyways, this Combo Breaker feature says that when we use Cross Counter and reduce the damage to 0 with it, we regain the Moxie point that we spent to use it in the first place. This is really good, and will definitely encourage us to use a Cross Counter more often, right? And doing so would increase both our survivability and our damage, potentially. Don't forget, our Fisticuffs die jumps up to a D12 here. You know, that's a nice damage increase if you're haymakering all the time, especially. It's just a flat 2 more damage per hit. At level 16, we would be a Pugilist 12. That means we get another feat, and I very much would want to bump my Constitution again to cap it at 20 here, which will help our squishy selves stay alive a little bit better. But then finally for us, at level 17, we would be a Pugilist 13, and that means we get Dig Deeper. This says that once per day, we can use a bonus action to basically enjoy the benefits of Dig Deep, that feature that gives us the bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage resistance. Sorry, I know I'm repeating myself a lot here, but these features are new, so I'm hoping it's helpful. But also, this lets us use our School of Hard Knock, the thing that gives us a d12 of damage on an attack twice per turn instead of just once. What's not clear to me is if we can add that extra d12 to the same attack, right? That is, on one single attack, can we just apply both uses here for 2d12 more damage once on a turn? The verbiage doesn't seem to prohibit it. And I like the idea of, the first time a haymaker lands, we just add 24 damage to not risk waiting to see if a second haymaker is going to land or not. Or, of course, better yet, maybe waiting to see if we crit, and then just adding 48 damage to the hit. What's more, since the extra d12 of damage happens once per turn, not once per round or once on our turn, if we get a reaction attack, we should be able to add the damage from hard knocks. And if we can add both of them to one attack, that's going to have an impact on the numbers, right? Now, we can only dig deeper once per long rest. There's no or take a level of exhaustion with this one. But the nice thing is that using it doesn't add exhaustion, right? So we could dig deep on a slightly easier fight, and then on a boss fight, dig deeper and not have to take a level of exhaustion for it, right? One bummer about the feature is that, unlike dig deeper only lasts for a minute. So if I assume that we're going to use it, I've got to sacrifice my bonus action, 1-2 punch on round 1 to do so, which sucks, making it only a slight damage increase over the course of the fight. Still worth it, I think, and you might have been blowing your bonus action on round 1 for dig deep most of the time anyways. A 10-minute timer is no guarantee that it will be active when combat starts for sure. Anyways, this brings us to our final damage report. Since last check, we've gained some survivability increases, but we've also added another d12 of damage once per round from dig deeper, though we have to sacrifice a couple of attacks on round 1 to get there, and bumped our fisticuffs die to a d12. Punching for a d12 of damage, or potentially just 12 damage, feels pretty awesome. What's more, thanks to the fact that we have 7 Moxie points now, and we regained the spent point on cross counter if we reduce the damage to 0 now, right? I'm just going to go ahead and assume that we will have the Moxie points to just start using our superiority die for damage via menacing attack or riposte, instead of trying to hold on to them for precision attack. Again, this is just an all-out combat encounter where we're blowing every resource we can, right? Might not be advisable at your table, but the damage is a little better on paper if we're adding 8 flat damage once per round from a superiority die than if we're always holding on to them just in case we miss it by a little bit. And if we can potentially be riposting sometimes, then between riposte, sentinel, and cross counter, now that cross counter might potentially refund our Moxie point, I think it's okay to bump that assumption on a reaction attack by a smidge. So yeah, let's say that we're getting one 50% of the time. That doesn't seem too far-fetched to me. We get a reaction attack if they leave our reach, even if they disengage, if they hit someone other than us, if they swing at us and miss, or if they swing at us and hit, and we reduce the damage to 0 via cross counter, right? Heck, 50% might be too conservative, but yeah, maybe not. Monsters hit pretty hard at this level, and will often do more than just bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, right? Anyways, these are my assumptions, and if we average it all over a 4-round combat encounter against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would do 166 damage per round on average, and against an 18 AC, it would be 156 DPR. And that's incredible, but it's not the hardest hitting build I've ever made for sustained damage. That Pyromaniac is more than double us at this level, and even my darling baby, the Blade Singer, passes us at this level here. To be fair, if Conjure Minor Elementals didn't scale so well, even the updated nerfed version, which I was using on both of those builds, or, if CME is just banned at your table, then yeah, things would look a lot different. But I've got 3 non-Conjure Minor Elementals using Warlocks nipping at the heels of the damage that this Pugilist is putting out. So I think there are a lot of things to discuss in some final thoughts. So let's get into it, shall we? The tier score for this build, if you take the damage that they do at every enemy armor class that we calculate for at each of the 4 damage reports, just average it into one big number, we end up with a 102, and that does beat out every other build I've done for sustained damage except the Pyromaniac. And it's worth noting that at early levels, before that Pyromaniac has a chance to really come online, we're beating them out handily too. And yeah, if most of us are stopping play by level 10 or so, then for most of us, this is going to outperform just about anything in the game, damage-wise, I think. So, is the Pugilist broken? I kind of feel like yes and no. On the one hand, this build that I've done for it is outperforming every other martial, no spells build I've ever done for damage by quite a bit. The closest martial build to this, damage-wise, is that BFG, and we are ahead of them by about 50% or so. To be fair, we are blowing more resources than they are here, so maybe that's warranted, but maybe not. So if we're just looking at damage, and especially if we're just comparing them to other martial classes, then yeah, the Pugilist might be overpowered. On the other hand, like I've been saying all along, we are pretty dang squishy. A melee fighter with lowish AC, no shield spell or anything. I mean, cross counter and bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage resistance and a D10 hit die will mollify that a little bit, but I don't think it's enough with some serious support in the form of healing and protection from your friends. They also lack a lot of the utility and control potential that rogues, and even these days, barbarians and fighters bring, to say nothing of what half and full casters get, right? If you built for grappling here, then yeah, you're bringing some solid control potential, and so the piss and vinegar route might be the best overall, like strongest option in that case, even if their damage might not be quite as good as the sweet science subclass that we've used. It could still be pretty good though. They get some cool stuff. But more importantly, in the they're not broken argument. I mean, right now, as I think we've shown amply on this channel, martial damage really tends to fall behind caster damage at higher tiers of play, especially. At least for a single combat encounter per day. And yeah, that's the big tell, right? That might encourage us all to either buff martials or add more combat encounters per long rest in our campaigns. And I know it's not all about damage, and there are issues of survivability, among other things, in the martials versus casters debate, but that's where we are. So the fact that this build is beating out most caster builds even for damage at most levels, I mean, maybe that's how it should be. If all we're really bringing to the table as a martial character is damage, with a little survivability, a little utility, a little control potential, sure, but paling when compared to what spells can do in those areas, then I kind of feel like we should be out damaging spellcasters for single target damage generally as a martial character. So maybe the Pugilist isn't broken. Maybe every other martial character in D&D is. I know this is the hill that I often die on, but especially if you're not going to change having just 1 or 2 combat encounters per long rest at your table, if you're getting into higher tiers of play, I kind of feel like this is about where all martials should be performing damage-wise. That's just me. All of that said, if Benjamin Huffman approached me, which he has not done, to ask what I might do to tweak the class, I'd probably look to scale that damage back just a smidgen at earlier levels and bump their survivability a bit as a result. Haymaker is so awesome. It's honestly, like I said, my favorite feature of the entire class, and so I hate to suggest a nerf to it. And again, it's much less of a problem if you're having multiple combat encounters per short rest especially, or if you're not easily able to get advantage on your attacks and are thus missing more often, but otherwise, yeah, it might be a bit overtuned at early levels of play especially. I might suggest only allowing you to throw a haymaker once per turn when you first get it, and then scale it up to more often as you level. Maybe let it increase at the same pace as your Moxie die, so you could do it twice per turn at level 5, 3 haymakers at level 11 and 4 at 17. And then maybe just let them have unarmored defense, but that lets your AC scale with your strength and your constitution. Not 12 plus con, but just 10 plus strength and con. So you'd be at about a 16 AC at level 1 and eventually be able to get up to 20. I don't know. I do like being able to benefit from light armor for when you get some good magical stuff. So alternatively, maybe you let their armor class simply add their strength modifier to their light armor instead of dexterity. That could work. Something along those lines. But anyways, those are my thoughts on the Pugilist, and I would love to try one out in game for sure. The flavor here is so phenomenal. And, if you feel like it's overtuned, you can make some tweaks along the lines that I've mentioned or something else similar. And I think it would work really well. But love it or hate it, that's the build for the week. So I hope you at least enjoyed my analysis. I also hope you at least know that I love you. Thank you so much for watching, for your support. It means the world to me. I hope you have a fantastic day and a really great week. And if you don't, will you please do me a huge favor and not give up? Hang in there, okay? You can do this. I know you can. I hope that you will do good and be kind, and that I see you again really soon. But until then, take care. Bye. In the clearing stands a boxer and a fighter by his trade, and he carries the reminders of every glove that laid him down or cut him till he cried out in his anger and his shame, I am leaving, but the fighter still remains. Lie, lie, lie. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, lie, lie. Lie, 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 lie. I mean, you gotta sing the boxer, right? When you're doing a pugilist build. I don't know how you not. I mean, you know, maybe I do like Mama Said Knock You Out. I mean, if I had the chops, right? It might surprise you. You know, some of you would probably look at me and be like, I bet that guy's got some sweet rap skills. The fact that that sentence just came out of my mouth the way it did probably would be a good indicator that I do not, in fact, have said skills. Definitely much more Vanilla Ice than Eminem, right? String cheese. Is it weird that I just eat it that way? I've seen some people become very abhorred by me just like chomping on a string cheese like that, but it's so much easier than like peeling it. That's just a lot more work. You can just, oh dude, new favorite shirt, check it out. It's Weezered. It's their Blue album. Hey everyone. So here at D4, I'd like to let's start that over. One fist, two fist, black, and I gotta do that different. Modifier from a superiority die, gosh, that's hard to say. One fist, two fist, since last check, we have but I think the one that I'd flip, sorry, I'm getting a cold and I'm fighting off the sniffles and the coughs. Okay, so we could still add our strength modifier. Okay, time to not talk again for the rest of the day.